Well, here we go. We're going to be diving into this match. Remember, the winner of this one will be advancing into that top 16. We have got the Golisopod and the Kyogre out for Tatsuya, and Ko has brought out the Rillaboom and the Thundurus. I mean, what a pairing to bring out for Ko when you've got a Kyogre opposing you.
Yeah, this is great, because, I mean, the Kyogre and the Golisopod are really threatened here. The Kyogre threatened by that Rillaboom, Grassy Glide, you know. It's going to take a lot of damage if it does stay on the field, so it has to be careful, and you've always got to be careful about the Thundurus as well. It's a prime target if you are running it to go for the Dynamax, and it threatens both the Kyogre and the Golisopod being part Bug type, and also the Water typing there. It doesn't really want to contend with anything of these Electric type attacks, and there's also the Fake Out here that you can use if you are called to maybe stop the Golisopod getting that first impression off if it has got it this first turn.
Yeah, and I want to know a little bit more about this Thundurus. You know, we see it run often in a supporting role and sometimes in an offensive role, so that's information that Tatsuya needs to find out. For now, it's just going to go for a Protect, however, as is the Kyogre on Tatsuya's side. And I think this is a very wise choice when you're against two Pokemon that can deal out super effective damage against you. Oh, look at that, Lee. It's actually a Protector piece over for the Rillaboom as well. And I think that's wise, as this Golisopod has gone for that first impression. That will be doing a big chunk of damage to the Rillaboom. So wise to Protect, because you cannot use first impression again now unless you switch out.
Yeah, so that's the one drawback with it. You know, the big threatening move that it has got access to that would do a lot of damage to that Rillaboom and threaten that knockout is now gone. To get that back onto the field, like you say, you're going to have to switch it out to bring it back into play and have access to it. And are you able to kind of get that board position back in front of the Rillaboom where you can utilize it? Now you know that there's a Protect there to pretty much make it null and void, makes it very difficult to utilize. And again, we're back to that kind of first turn situation where both these Water types are pretty threatened right now in front of this Grass type Rillaboom and the Thundurus with its Electric type attacks.
Well, we're going to see some more action on the battlefield as the Dynamax will be coming out, I believe, here on Ko's side of the field. Now, there are two options here, and I think going for the Thundurus indicates this is definitely more of the offensive one. We're going to see some big damage coming out, possibly something like a Max Lightning or even a Max Airstream to start getting the speed up on Ko's side of the field so that you can then start rolling with big damage going into these later turns. But it's actually going to be another Dynamax here, Lee. Do you think it could be that Golisopod, or is it more reasonable to be the Kyogre?
I think more reasonable to be the Kyogre, as much as I want it to be the Golisopod. I would love to see it, but it is the Kyogre. It does make a little bit more sense, but very brave from Tatsuya to you know, go for that Dynamax here. Like we've mentioned already, it is very threatened. Even in a Dynamax state, it's going to take a lot of damage from these potential Grass and Electric type attacks that are coming out.
Yeah, big chunk of damage from the Grassy Glide. And it activates.
Weakness policy.
Oh, I haven't seen that for a while. It's going to be weakness policy Kyogre. As Sucker Punch comes out from the Golisopod, going to do just a little bit of damage to that opposing Thundurus. But I think all eyes are on this Kyogre. If it's able to survive the Max Lightning, it's going to be able to retaliate with big damage. And it survives on 1 HP. Fantastic work from this Kyogre. And now Tatsuya is in a position where you've got the weakness policy activated. You've got the rain on the field. A Max Geyser coming out from this Kyogre is going to hit so hard. Yeah, and it doesn't really matter what item that Thundurus is holding. With that boost in its special attack, with the rain behind it, it is going to go down. And Tatsuya taking a huge lead here, getting rid of that Dynamax Thundurus so early on and not allowing Ko to really get much out of that Dynamax. And, you know, the problem is, though, it's a good return for your Kyogre, but it's on such low health now, you know, on that 1 HP, it couldn't get any lower. And that's the problem now. It's in range for a Grassy Glide to kind of easily pick it up. So Tatsuya maybe wants to allow it to go down, or if he's got anything in the back, like maybe Incineroar, he can try and get onto the field in place of that Golisopod. That will give him that fake out support to allow him to maybe get one more attack off before the Dynamax ends. I mean, what a perfect Dynamax to double your HP to be able to survive 2 super effective attacks. I mean, fantastic play there by Tatsuya, but as you've mentioned now, the Kyogre's in a dangerous position. You need to find a way to deal with that Rillaboom before you're able to go for anything with that Kyogre. Otherwise, it's just going to be a prime target. But the same side, though, Ko might be like, you know, Kyogre could be protecting here, go for a max guard, but if you calculate that and maybe decide to target down the Golisopod, that Kyogre is going to be free to go for another boosted attack. I think it's nice to bring in the Zacian here, applying that kind of speed pressure as well, and something like a Behemoth Blade is going to deal significant damage. Yeah, and I think if you are Tatsuya, if you do have that Incineroar in the back, it's a great time to bring it in. You know, we've just seen the Zacian hit the field, that Intrepid Sword activate, and get that attack boost. So to kind of neutralize that, get the Intimidate onto the field, and you also weaken the Rillaboom at the same time. The problem is, though, with the fake out support with the Zacian and how fast it is going to outspeed the Kyogre, so you really, to support the Kyogre, now you really need some sort of speed control, which
there may not be too many options, although there is a Tornadus on Tatsuya's team that could be an option and would threaten that Rillaboom. It's not really easy to get it onto the field in front of something like Zacian.
Well, moving first, of course, is the Zacian going for the play rough. It connects into the Gliscod, takes it below 50%, which means emergency exit has activated. And I do quite like this position here for Tatsuya. It gives you the opportunity to pivot a Pokemon onto the battlefield and allow Gliscod to come back in later and use that first impression once again. And that could be some good damage into the opposing Rillaboom, as is anything really that this Incineroar wants to show its way, because throwing this Intimidate down against two physical attackers is going to weaken them, and you then have the fake out pressure going forward. The Kyogre's going to go straight up for the Max Geyser here. There's no Grassy Glide coming out, and it's going to be able to get the one-hit KO against that Zacian. This Kyogre is getting KOs left, right, and center.
Yeah, that is a huge turn for Tatsuya to get rid of the Zacian, and the high horsepower misses. I think you can see what Cole was going for there, going for the double up into that Incineroar switch, but I love the play so much from that emergency exit, and you can see how useful that ability is there, where it does take the attack from Zacian. The ability activates, and you get that free switch into Incineroar to avoid that play rough damage. You're in a much healthier position, and getting very fortunate there, missing the high horsepower, but also at the same time, you getting an extra attack off with your Kyogre. And just like you said, Lou, maybe predicting that the Max Guard was coming out there, so making the most out of this turn, because really, like we've said, you want to try and get that Incineroar, and it makes the most sense. So both players making the right calls there. Unfortunately, the high horsepower missing is not ideal for Cole.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I absolutely love the boldness of Tatsuya's play there. Just keeping the Kyogre in, not going for a protect, and being able to get that key KO. And now Ko is locked down to the last two remaining Pokemon. You know, you've got Rillaboom and Incineroar. Both of your restricteds have been knocked out. And yes, you know, the Kyogre's again in a treacherous position, but the fact that Tatsuya's got Pokemon in the back that can come in and deal with Pokemon like the Rillaboom, you know, something like the first impression is going to be able to hit really hard. It's going to be a difficult situation for Ko to navigate here.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned as well that the Grassy Glide didn't come out that last turn because of the electric train set up from that Thundurus. Before it did go down that turn that it went for the Dynamax. So the Grassy Glide not really an option, giving this Kyogre a little bit more room to do things. And, you know, Tatsuya taking that turn to really punish the fact that Ko didn't target into it there, because you could have went for the Kyogre. You were still going to probably lose the Zacian in the same case, but we are going to see a Max Guard this turn.
Yeah, good observation there with the terrain changes, Lee. I think this is a wise Max Guard because the Fake Out would have been able to get rid of that 1 HP. High Horsepower does manage to connect this time, doing about a third of damage. The Intimidate really paying off, and it allows the Incineroar to be able to go for this parting shot. And you can see Tatsuya's just trying to weaken the offensive pressure of both this Rillaboom and the Incineroar by switching his own Incineroar out. It can come back, throw another Intimidate down later, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if Kyogre goes down here necessarily, you know, in the next couple of turns, because it allows Tatsuya to bring the Incineroar back in later on.
Yeah, and that's it. Now you also get the chance to use that first impression again with the Gliscod. It's been very impactful in this match, you know, and it does threaten that Rillaboom this next turn with that first impression. So the Incineroar is not going to be able to outspeed it, you wouldn't have thought. So they're caught in a little bit of an awkward position where he's almost forced to protect the Rillaboom here, which frees up the Kyogre to actually get an attack off, unless you can adjust your board state. But unfortunately, these are Ko's two last Pokemon, so he's in a bit of a really tight situation here where Tatsuya's set up a board condition where he can close this one out, even on that 1 HP.
Yeah, I mean, Kyogre is being an absolute trooper right now, staying on the battlefield. But I think you make a good point about the relevance of the speed here. Because, yes, Rillaboom can go for the Protect, but then, of course, that Kyogre can go for some Water-type moves and try and pick up a KO against that Incineroar. First impression is actually going to come into Incineroar, does about a third of damage, as Kyogre follows up with the Thunder, actually using the rain to ensure 100% accuracy into the Incineroar, and will be able to pick up the KO. And I really like going for that play here. You don't want to risk maybe missing something like an Origin Pulse and getting that guaranteed KO with the Thunder in the rain, knowing the accuracy is going to be in check.
Yeah, and you've got the boost as well from the electric terrain that's on the field to ensure that you are getting the damage you need to get rid of the Incineroar, not take any risks, and utilize something like Origin Pulse that has got that lower accuracy. So yeah, setting this up perfectly. And now the Gliscod on the field now has used that first impression, maybe predicting the Protect on the Rillaboom there, which does make sense, but getting the Incineroar back in, putting this Rillaboom down to -2 attack. It's not really going to be able to do too much to either of these Pokemon that are on the field now that do threaten it.
I mean, I'm certainly interested to know with the Kyogre what, water move it is necessarily running, because we talked about the accuracy of Origin Pulse, but at the same time, if you're running something like Water Spout on 1 HP, it's really going to deal no damage at all. So I think a really good option to obviously go for that Thunder.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And it does come down to the options. If you are just relying, like you say, on that Water Spout, it's a bit of a stretch for doing too much damage on that HP number. So yeah, and with the terrain there, it just makes a lot more sense. Like you mentioned, it gets that accuracy boost in the rain, so it was the correct choice for Tatsuya to just get rid of that threat and Incineroar off the field and take this down to a 2-on-1 situation now.
Seeing the Leech Life reveal on the Gliscopod as well, that's good information for Ko to have going forward. You can see the way Ko's playing out this endgame, though. You're in a difficult situation. You're going to have to start thinking about that game too and how you're going to make those adjustments. And I think one of the critical turns here was losing that Thundurus. Knowing that you've got that weakness policy on the opposing Kyogre and you weren't able to KO it, you also then had set the electric terrain that has really kind of stopped the Rillaboom from being able to roll through its tracks. The Flare Blitz not being able to pick up a KO against that Rillaboom. And Leech Life from the Gliscopod is going to be able to connect and pick up that final KO to take game 1 for Tatsuya. I mean, Gliscopod, looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to say in that match, Gliscopod has definitely been one of the standout Pokemon there. You've already mentioned the big turning point in the game, the survival from the Kyogre. That just shows how good a player he is. He's not just... He's trying to figure out the whole time when he's got time to figure out what he needs to do, what he maybe regrets doing. Not regrets, but feels like it could have been different decisions that he made in that first game to adjust it going into game 2. So, but we aren't going to see any different leads here.
No, for Ko, it's going to be the Rillaboom and the Thundurus, but it is a change for Tatsuya. We see both restricteds on the field, Groudon and Kyogre. Now, interestingly, let's look at the speeds here. The drought goes off first, so we know that the Groudon is running a little bit faster than that Kyogre, and the rain is going to be the dominant weather on the field. Yeah,
and that's it. The rain on the field, Kyogre in its more preferred position, and it's a little bit like game 1, but we know from the attacks from game 1, the Grassy Glide and the Max Lightning aren't enough to get the Kyogre. So do you put yourself in that same situation where you potentially allow the Kyogre to max again, hit it with those super effective attacks, and then lose your Dynamax turn 1? It's not probably the thing that you want to do, but Tatsuya here as well got a little bit more of an edge than he had in that game 1. He was putting a lot of pressure on the Rillaboom there in that game 1 with the Gliscopod, but now got that Groudon here that can really threaten the Thundurus. The Thundurus really not as effective against that Groudon here.
Yeah, I mean, all eyes on that Rillaboom, to be honest, but also Thundurus getting the Defiant boost from the Intimidate switch and from that Incineroar. I mean, Rillaboom really has the pick of choices. You can do significant damage to either the Kyogre or the Groudon, and you can utilize Fake Out. So Rillaboom really does kind of call this turn for Ko. But we're going to see a Dynamax straight out of the blocks here for Tatsuya, and of course, it is going to be that Groudon. So even in the rain, Groudon's here to maybe shake things up a little bit. Groudon has such a diverse move pool. You can always go for something like the Max Quake, start boosting up your special defenses. There's just so many options that could come into play here. Even something like a Max Rockfall to just get rid of that Thundurus. So I think Ko going for the Protect here, really nice and wise, just in case a Max Rockfall is coming his way. And the target of the Grassy Glide was indeed into that Groudon, but the Intimidate and the extra bulk from the Dynamax going to be paying off as Max Rockfall comes out from the Groudon. It is going to connect down onto that opposing Thundurus. Does so much through the Protect, but thanks to the Protect, it's going to stay around for another turn.
Yeah, that's a nice Protect there from Ko, just to make sure, to kind of scout out what was going on from Tatsuya's side of the field as we see that Groudon go for the Dynamax here. The problem is with getting the Incineroar onto the field is you do get the Intimidate, of course, but like we saw there, that Defiant ability on the Thundurus activates and gives it the +1 in its attack stat, making it even stronger. Although it's not really gonna, I don't think it's gonna have the tools to be able to really deal too much damage to the Groudon. The Groudon should be able to get off another attack. And now with that Incineroar in, you're kind of saying, well, yeah, I'll give the Thundurus an attack boost. Doesn't matter, my Groudon doesn't really care about that too much, but it does allow me a turn to get Fake Out onto the field and prevent that Rillaboom from attacking into my Groudon. The thing that you have to worry about is the Rillaboom could go for a Dynamax or a Gigantamax as well, and that's something that you have to worry about, because if you Fake Out into that slot, and it goes for that Gigantamax or Dynamax and then attacks with the grassy terrain, it's still present on the field now. It's going to have that boost into the Groudon, and even at -1, it's still going to do a lot of damage. But No point. We're just going to see a Protect Loop.
Yeah, just to protect. But interestingly, a Brick Break coming out here from the Thunderous into that opposing Groudon. And Max Lightning, this is a really interesting choice from the Groudon. Going to be able to pick up the KO against that opposing Thunderous, of course, overwrite the terrain. And I think that's the key thing. We saw in Game 1 how having the electric terrain on the field was so detrimental to Ko's Rillaboom being able to go for priority grassy glides. So not only do you get the KO on that Thunderous, but you now stop this Rillaboom from having a party on the battlefield.
Yeah, I love that play a lot. You know, getting that electric terrain, like you say, it takes away the immediate threat of that grassy glide now and puts Groudon in a way better position. Cole being a little bit more preserved here and probably looking at the board state and thinking, well, he took a lot of damage from that max rockfall. It's not worth Dynamaxing my Thunderous this game. I'm not going to do very much damage, even with that Defiant boost. So maybe he has got something like the Kyogre in the back now to come in, which would put him in a good position. Because in front of something like an Incineroar and a Groudon, if you Dynamax your Kyogre in this situation, you're thinking, well, I've got my Rain Up if I come in now. I'm going to have these boosted water type attacks. And it puts Tatsuya a little bit more on the back foot than what he is presently.
Yeah, and of course we saw the Life Orb on that Groudon as well, so it's going to be dealing out additional damage. It's nice to see it with the Life Orb when we know it having the Red Orb from previous formats, but it's still here to be able to deal out big damage. And if you're Ko in this situation, again, you can see how long he's taking his time to be able to think about it, because this is day 3 at the World Championships. Everything is at stake, and if Ko loses this game, he's out of the competition. So bringing Kyogre in here, I think is nice. Not only do you override the weather of the sand, but you also then bring the rain into the effect, and that will benefit the Kyogre. Ko also does still have the opportunity to utilize that Dynamax.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think with the Rain Up now, it all comes down to which of the Groudon and the Kyogre on opposite ends of the field will outspeed the other. You can, well, we can't presume anything because we haven't seen the Kyogre yet, but you can assume that Tatsuya's Groudon is quite a faster and offensive one. So it does probably have quite a bit of speed to it, so it might outspeed the Kyogre on Cole's side of the field. But like I say, information at the moment is very limited, so we'll have to go into this turn. But the immediate thing is that the Groudon is threatened by this Kyogre because of that potential Dynamax. And Kyogre, one of those Pokemon where it will be able to take an attack even if it is Life Orb boosted.
Yeah, and I do like the switch by Ko a lot, preserving that Rillaboom for later on to deal with potentially both the restrictors on Tatsuya's side, and of course the Intimidate helping out to reduce the offensive pressure of that Groudon, because we've seen that it's got that Max Lightning and the electric terrain's on the field, so Kyogre isn't necessarily going to be safe from anything here. So I think getting an attack drop is just maybe going to give that Kyogre the breathing space if it does decide to Dynamax, which I believe we're seeing happening here, to be able to take one of those powerful Max Lightnings. And Tatsuya also making an adjustment and bringing in the Golisopod, I think, to be able to have that, you know, first impression pressure going into that next turn. We saw how much it did to the opposing Incineroar, and Groudon is going to go for the Max Lightning. Life Orb boosted in the electric terrain.
Wow.
Does so much damage.
So much damage.
I would love to know the statistics if it hadn't had that attack drop, but it does allow the Kyogre the opportunity to fire back a Max Geyser in the rain. Connecting into the Gliscod that switched in. Fantastic play by Tatsuya here, because emergency exit's going to activate, and then Incineroar's going to come back in.
Yeah, and he's going to have that fake out pressure going into this next turn. Or, you know, it might even be the Kyogre hitting the field now for Tatsuya, because it puts him in a great position to utilize potentially the electric terrain like we just saw the Groudon do there, and get that big damage onto Ko's Kyogre.
Yeah, I forgot the Rillaboom had left the field for a minute there. I was like, another Intimidate, let's go. But actually, you're so rightly bringing the Kyogre in here. It can utilize the rain, the electric terrain, and go for those powerful thunders. And I mean, I just have to credit the way Tatsuya has been able to pivot the Pokemon in and out here, getting perfectly timed calculations, and now you've got both your restricteds back on the field, just like he started at the beginning of this game too. Yeah,
I mean, you can see that it's the use of emergency exit here is being executed perfectly. And I think, you know, this is an example how Gliscod works in this format. You know, you get it in to take the damage that you want and get a free kind of switch into another Pokemon to put that instant pressure back onto the field.
Oh, and the speed of this Groudon, going to be able to go for its press for space and connect. Not going to KO, though, critically, so Kyogre is going to be free to go for another Max Geyser here, and it will be able to remove this Groudon from the field. But I really do think Groudon's been able to put in the work, going for those Max Rockfalls and Max Lightnings. You know, choices we haven't seen on Groudon so much. We've actually seen a big shift in movement to maybe the Kyogre being the Dynamax Pokemon, but also critically, when the Groudon is Dynamaxing, it tends to go for those Max Quakes to get the special defense boost. And it was nice to see it go for those more kind of tech options on the move pool and picking up KOs.
Yeah, and now you get the Gliscod Glycopod coming back onto the field. It is going to have access to that first impression now. It will be able to knock out the Kyogre on Ko's side of the field if it doesn't have access to Protect. And if it does have the Max Guard option here, it's kind of forced to go for that, leaving the Incineroar in a little bit of an awkward position where it will get knocked out by a potential Water-type attack coming out from Tatsuya's Kyogre that's sitting in a decent position now, healthy on the field, where Ko's side, like you say, the Groudon, even though it went down the last turn, has done the work that Tatsuya needed it to do, putting these Pokemon right down so low on their health bars.
Yeah, it's certainly a predicament for Ko, particularly, you know, the speed interactions here are going to be interesting. Glycopod can go for that first impression and try and pick up a KO. But we're actually going to see a switch as Incineroar does now rejoin the field just to be able to preserve that Kyogre for a little bit later and have the fake out utility going into the next turn as well, particularly if it's able to dodge out of the way of anything Kyogre wants to throw. But instead, it is going to go for that Max Guard. Like you said, first impression was going into that slot. So a wise Max Guard from Ko here, just keeping the Kyogre on the field for a bit longer and allowing the Incineroar to go for that parting shot. So going to be reducing the offensive pressure of the Glycopod and allowing Ko the option to bring Incineroar back in later, maybe try and throw and Intimidate down against that Groudon and use the fake out pressure. And I really do think at this point in the match, having that fake out, being able to, you know, stop a Pokemon in its tracks is going to be the commanding force, because you're either forcing your opponent to protect or leave it vulnerable to an attack. And I think whoever's going to be able to make those calls correctly is going to take this particular game. Yeah,
I don't think you could have put it any better there, Lou. I think the fact that Rillaboom's coming onto the field now and it's going to have its grassy terrain active again, you've just got to wonder what Tatsuya's locked into with his Incineroar. Has he went for a parting shot into that opposing Incineroar slot that would reduce the attack on the Rillaboom, get your Kyogre onto the field, and then give you the option where you've still got your own Incineroar in the back to then cycle out the Glycopod to get it back onto the field to threaten once again with that first impression, because you can see, like you say, it's forcing protects, it's forcing switches, and it's making it difficult for Ko to kind of build any momentum here.
Well, Rillaboom's back in action and setting that grassy terrain on the field once again, so it's going to be able to use those priority moves with the grassy glide as long as it stays on the field with that terrain. You know, we need to make sure that there's no other switches, but with the Dynamax turns dwindling down, it looks like Rillaboom's going to be here to stay in his lovely field.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think just mistaken with the parting shot there. The Incineroar actually switched in there, so it didn't have a turn, but that does mean that Tatsuya has positioned the Incineroar where it's got an active fake out now coming in, where it can stop the potential Kyogre from attacking here. But the problem is, what is the speed between the Rillaboom and the Incineroar? If you're both going for fake out, who's going to land their fake out first? And you potentially do risk maybe losing the Incineroar if you lose that speed tie in the kind of fake out war here.
And of course, Glycopod's just switched in as well, so you've got first impression to contend with too.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, you know, do you pick a fake out into the Glycopod, and then it's like a bit of a moot turn there where you kind of Tatsuya fakes out the Kyogre and Rillaboom fakes out the Glycopod. But we say protect.
Yeah, on the Incineroar again, a new meta trend that's been really popular coming into the World Championships as the fake out connects with a critical hit onto that opposing Glycopod, of course pushing it right under into that yellow bar, meaning emergency exit is going to happen once again. And I actually love seeing this Glycopod jump in and out of the battlefield and having this longevity here to kind of show why it is such a hot contender on this team. Origin Pulse comes out from Ko's Kyogre here. Obviously not going to be able to deal anything to the protecting Incineroar, but going to be able to deal a little bit to the opposing Kyogre. But I think it's a great switch in here because Kyogre is going to be able to take this attack really well.
Yeah, that's true, and you're hoping at this point, you can see the use of the grassy terrain as well with that Glycopod. It's really benefiting it going over that 50% mark and then going under it, and then that emergency exit activating again. But we already know, you know, the Kyogre coming onto the field now, it's not like a closed case for Tatsuya here. He does have to worry about the potential grassy glide coming out from the Rillaboom now, and it will be, you know, we have seen it be able to take that attack when it's in its Dynamax form. Can it take it in this position here, and what other options has it got access to? You know, we haven't seen it with an Assault Vest. It's got that weakness policy, so we've not really seen too many options from the Kyogre yet. So, you know, you're going to have to be careful with it still if you are Tatsuya, but we are seeing the Incineroar switch out and that Glycopod come back onto the field once again.
Glycopod's back in action, and Kyogre, I think, wisely protecting, just like you said, in the face of something like this Rillaboom that is going for the grassy glide into that protect. Just going to keep Kyogre around a little bit longer as the Origin Pulse comes out once again by Ko's Kyogre here, and this time it's going to find its mark on that Glycopod that was able to avoid it in the previous turn. And interestingly, it is not enough to get the KO. Glycopod's going to hang around, but as it came in with that lower HP emergency exit doesn't activate this turn.
Not this turn, no. It has got access to that first impression, though, now. So you are... it all comes down to the speed tie again between the Rillaboom. What's faster, the Rillaboom or the Gliscopod? I think the Gliscopod, from information in Game 1, looks as though it does outspeed that Rillaboom. But, you know, unless you're 100% confident and sure about that, it does make it a little bit tricky. It has taken a lot of damage. So, you know, if you do target into that slot this turn with the Grassy Glide, then... you're going to lose the Gliscopod, but at the same time, if you don't protect the Rillaboom, you lose that speed tie. The first impression is 100% going to remove the biggest threat to Tatsuya right now, and being that Rillaboom.
I mean, both of our trainers as well only have 3 Pokemon remaining. So as soon as they, you know, take another KO, they're going to be locked down to the last 2 Pokemon. They're not going to have the switch ability that we've seen them utilizing in this game too. And it has been integral, being able to have those fake outs, the first impressions, and resetting certain weathers. I think it's wise then for Tatsuya to be able to retreat that Kyogre in the favor of the Incineroar, just being able to throw the Intimidate down against that opposing Rillaboom, and again, just have that fake out pressure on the field. Yeah,
and just to be able to, like you say, utilize that fake out the next turn, it gives you a bit more of a chance to maneuver around the field, as we do see Cole reposition as well, get that Rillaboom out of harm's way, and have that fake out access the next turn here, and drop an Intimidate onto both of these physical attackers, while the Kyogre is staying in for Cole.
I mean, Rillaboom might be out of harm's way, but the Kyogre is not. It's gets KO'd by first impression. I mean, I was going to say the Incineroar switching in as well with such low HP. We saw how much first impression did to it in Game 1. That was going to be a knockout straight away. And I think this Gliscopod, just if Tatsuya is able to keep switching it out and bringing it back in, that first impression pressure, that's a hard word to say quickly, is going to be able to get those KOs. And, you know, now from Ko's side of things, you just have the Rillaboom and the Incineroar. This is very similar to the kind of ending that we saw in that Game 1.
Yeah, and I think now if you are Tatsuya, you just want to concentrate all of your efforts down onto that Rillaboom, because once the Rillaboom's gone, Kyogre can come in and deal with Incineroar pretty easily. And the grassy terrain now, it's probably the worst time for Rillaboom to actually come back onto the field, because it's got one more turn left before it actually dissipates from the field. And you kind of want to be bringing your Rillaboom in maybe a turn later, which is a bit unfortunate for Cole, where he's going to have access to those grassy glides, whereas unfortunately the priority is going to be lost when that grassy terrain ends after this next turn.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And something else I want to point the attention to is if you take a look at the My Time on both of our players, we've talked a couple of times about how Ko has been, you know, utilizing every second of potential switches and plays to be able to think about the situation, but he only had less than a minute left on the clock here compared to Tatsuya's 3 minutes. So if he's not careful, this game's going to start timing out. I mean, Tatsuya's in a phenomenal spot where you can really actually start, you know, stalling through that time as well with the fake outs and things like that, and kind of putting Ko in a situation where you have to think under pressure and lock in those moves quickly, otherwise the game is going to run out of time.
Yeah, and that's something else to consider. Like, yeah, really good observation here, Lou, that not long to choose your moves, and if you've been taking a long time, which is natural for this state in the tournament,
it's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. You want to make sure that your choices are the correct ones each turn, so it makes sense. You can see the clock ticking down though. They've not got long, where Tatsuya is pretty comfortable. He's got as much time as he kind of needs here, as we see that Incineroar switch out and the Kyogre hit the field.
Yeah, the fake out's going to come out from the Incineroar into the Gliscopod, but it's not going to be able to get the KO. Rillaboom is going to go for that grassy glide and get the KO, however, on that opposing Kyogre. So now we actually see all the restrictors removed from the field. It's going to come down to these more supporting Pokemon, where you've got the Incineroar and Gliscopod for Tatsuya, and the Rillaboom and the Incineroar for Ko. As you can look on that timer, though, there was only 34 seconds left on Ko's side of the field. If potentially with the Incineroar now coming back in, you can stall out another turn with something like the fake out, and that's something Ko no longer is able to utilize, you could really start pushing that timer down all the way.
Yeah, and you know, now that the timer is low, so you're going to be, if you are caught, having to lock in pretty quickly. But that was a really, like, let's not take anything away from that turn. For the Rillaboom to go for a grassy glide on that last turn and catch the Kyogre on a switch in is huge. It's nice for Tatsuya, of course, to get the Incineroar back onto the field again and cycle another Intimidate, but he's still got it pretty much to deal with 2 Pokemon with kind of a really low health Gliscopod and also a pretty healthy Incineroar.
Yeah, but Gliscopod hangs on with 2 HP. I was going to say this Flare Blitz has something to say about it, but Drill Run is going to return and pick up the KO against the opposing Incineroar. Gliscopod Glycopod absolutely taking names on the world stage. I mean, what a phenomenal survival.
That is huge. Just being able to take that attack and then get the knockout, that's massive. And he put himself in a great position now. You don't need to worry about anything else. You've got the Rillaboom now. It is threatened by the Incineroar and the Rillaboom, and it looks like there's been a little bit of a communication issue here with the game.
Yeah, just a little bit of an issue, but I'm sure the judges will let us know what's happening in a couple of minutes. The player could really shake it up going into this Game 3, and I believe they are ready on the stage. So we're going to head on over there and dive a little deeper into this Game 3. I mean, there are so many interesting choices our players could make.
But let's get into it, Lou.
Love this. Game 3 of the Masters Top Cut. The winner of this next match is going to be advancing into top 16, and Ko is not shaking anything up here. It's going to be Rillaboom and Thunderous once again, but Tatsuya has changed up the leads for the third game in a row here. Incineroar's coming in to throw down that Intimidate and give the Thunderous straight away a Defiant boost, so it is ready to rock and roll here in Game 3, as Groudon's also on the field. So possibly a prime position for Groudon to do a little bit more of what it did in the last match, going for something like the Max Rockfall into the Thunderous, but then Ko is going to be aware of that.
Yeah, he will be aware of it now, but there's not a massive amount he can do to kind of prevent the Groudon going for that Dynamax. He does have, obviously, the Rillaboom on the field, but we're kind of replicating that turn 2 from Game 2, where, you know, Tatsuya now doesn't need to switch out his Kyogre, and, you know, they've got the Sun on the field now, which is really helping the Groudon more than anything, and in particular helping that Incineroar. He does have active Fake Out here, so he could potentially go for that into the Rillaboom, or the Rillaboom go for it into the Incineroar to prevent it from doing anything this turn. But you've also got the Defiant boost as well that's activated on that Thunderous, but it's not in the best of positions unless it goes for the Dynamax here into something like the Incineroar or the Groudon, give the speed boost to that Kyogre that's just hit the field, and that might be enough for Ko to get an advantage, to get an early lead in this game. Absolutely
love that synergy option potential from the Thunderous. Like you said, if it gets the Max Airstream boost up, Kyogre's on the field, as long as it doesn't, you know, lose too much HP. If it's running something like the Water Spout, it can deal big damage, but we've seen it already rock Origin Pulse, and if you can get the speed advantage here, knowing that the Rain is the dominant weather on the field, because Groudon would have to switch out and switch back in to reset that Rain, you can start taking some big KOs, and I really like this bold offensive play from Ko coming straight out here. Tatsuya is also going to go for the Dynamax, however, onto that Groudon, and I would not be surprised to maybe see that Max Rockfall come out, because not only does it then try and deal with the Thunderous, but it also will overwrite that Rain for the Kyogre, and, you know, not allowing it to deal so much damage with its water-type moves. It's going to be a Protect, however, from the Incineroar, so no Fake Out coming out straight away from Tatsuya, just playing that little bit more defensively as the Max Airstream comes out from the Thunderous. So it's going to go into the opposing Groudon, do a significant chunk of damage, actually, about a third of HP, knocked off the HP bar of that Groudon, and of course boosting up the speed on Ko's side. So these next couple of turns could be so advantageous for Ko as the Max Rockfall comes out from the Groudon.
Yeah, and it will be into that Thunderous. And it isn't. Oh, that is a huge amount of damage. But these, and then the critical hit there, taking down the Thunderous. So Tatsuya able to pick up the knockout here onto the Thunderous, and a big turn from. But the big thing is that Ko has been able to get that speed boost onto the Kyogre. You think you can see what he was trying to do there, get the Kyogre into a position. Unfortunately, because you've kind of put your emphasis on Dynamaxing the Thunderous to get that speed boost,
yes,
it's a lot of resource just to get a bit extra speed on your Kyogre, which we identified is a problem for you. You want to be able to outspeed that Groudon. Problem is now you've not got your Rain up, and to get it on the field again, you are going to have to take the Kyogre out, which in turn would lose you the speed boost, so it's not really worth it. You're going to have to try and keep it on the field now. But, you know, Tatsuya's still got access to 4 Pokemon. We don't know what he's got in the back, so he's got the abilities to switch around. We've already seen him have that Glycopod that he's utilized before, bring in onto the field, take an attack, get that emergency exit activated, and get something a bit more beneficial next to it. The thing is now, if Rillaboom comes in next to this Kyogre, it's going to have access to that Fake Out once again, and with the grassy terrain still active on the field without an Intimidate onto it, like we saw from that start of the game, it is going to be hitting a lot harder. So Groudon in a very precarious position right now, so you'd think maybe a Max Guard coming out here would be the safer play from Tatsuya, and try and maybe switch in something like Glycopod for that Incineroar, but this is something that maybe Ko could read into as well.
Well, it looks like in this set, Glycopod's here to stay. It's back on the battlefield. like you mentioned, Lee, a good switch bringing out that Incineroar with the Max Guard paired up with the Groudon. The Grassy Glide is going to go into what was actually the Golisopod there, as Water Spout is the move choice for the opposing Kyogre here. It's going to be able to do a significant chunk to the Golisopod and, of course, activate that emergency exit. So as soon as we saw it, Lee, it's back off the battlefield. But this does give Tatsuya the opportunity to bring in, you know, the Incineroar from the back again, throw the Intimidate down against the Rillaboom, and just give Groudon a little bit more breathing room. I mean, if you're Groudon in this situation, you could always start going for something like the Max Quakes, targeting down into that opposing Kyogre slot, because even if the Kyogre switches out to try and reset the weather, looking at the Pokemon in the back, it could be, you know, an Incineroar switch in or a Zacian switch in, and neither of them want to really take a Max Quake. Not only would you maybe be getting some big damage, but you'll be getting the special defense boost up as well to help out your partner Pokemon when the Kyogre is able to come back in.
Yeah, and that's a great point, yeah. So you've got a pretty free Max Quake if you want here, and now showing once again how good that emergency exit is from that Golisopod, coming in, appreciating the Grassy Glide. How many Pokemon can say that? Yes, hit me with that Grassy Glide, because you're going to put me in range for that Water Spout to get my ability activated, to allow me to get my Incineroar back on the field. And even if it hadn't activated there, he's going to be in a position to get that first impression and pressure the Rillaboom the next turn anyway. So it makes it very difficult. But we are seeing not the Incineroar, it is the Zacian come back in for that Rillaboom this next turn.
Yeah, but it's switching out for the Rillaboom, so that's going to be coming into the slot as the Kyogre does just go straight up for a Protect here. So Ko hesitant to switch out. The Kyogre doesn't want to kind of lose the speed boost that it's been able to get, and a wise Protect considering the Fake Out went down into that slot. But the Groudon is indeed going to go for that Max Quake, and it has gone into that Kyogre slot. So not going to be dealing too much damage. Would have been lovely to see it go down into the opposing Zacian, but like I was saying earlier, you might be thinking that that Kyogre is going to switch out for the weather reset. So I think it was a really safe choice from Tatsuya.
Yeah, a nice safe play there to not really take too many risks. You don't want to kind of overextend yourself and put yourself in a position where you kind of lose the game from just taking a risk that was a bit unnecessary. He is in a little bit of a tricky position now. Obviously the Dynamax turn's finishing with the Groudon, which isn't great, not got much return on it. Obviously got that special defense boost there, which is great. Got a little bit of damage onto the Kyogre through the Protect, and now you are in a tricky position where the Groudon's going to be outsped by both the Kyogre and the Zacian, where both these Pokemon are going to be able to do significant amounts of damage, and you'll find yourself in that position where you've got your Incineroar out on the field when Zacian comes onto the field, and you haven't got the ability to cycle and Intimidate right now, which is not the preferable kind of conditions to be in. So you would imagine that Tatsuya is going to have to kind of readjust his board here to kind of better deal with these two threats on Cole's side of the field.
Of course, and Tatsuya still hasn't revealed the fourth Pokemon on the roster here for him in this particular match. But switching out the Groudon, bringing that Golisopod back in and being able to apply some pressure with something like the first impression in the next turn, as the Incineroar does indeed go for that Protect in the face of both of the restricted on Ko's side. The Behemoth Blade comes out from the Zacian. This is going to find its way onto the Golisopod, and it doesn't have the biggest amount of HP remaining, and it is going to be felled by the Behemoth Blade. But I think Golisopod throughout this entire set has been able to show its kind of defensive capabilities, but it's just not enough to be able to go down against a Zacian. No,
unfortunately not, but I think it's done enough to allow Tatsuya room to try and manipulate his board position into a better state here. He's got the option now to bring in the Groudon again if he wants to and get the Sun on the field, which is going to further reduce the attack power of the water type attacks from the Kyogre, and at the same time it gives the Incineroar the boost that it's kind of calling out for. The Sun's on the field, I can really threaten that Zacian, I can get rid of it, and you're kind of pinned at this point as well. If you want to switch the Zacian, what comes in? The Rillaboom, and that's not going to want to take a Flare Blitz. That will go down as well. So, you know, I think it's a really nice position here for Tatsuya to be in. You can protect your Groudon here, and then maybe Ko has to make a decision where do I predict the Protect and put everything I've got, all my resources into that Incineroar, and try and hope that between a Water Spout and maybe something like a Sacred Sword is enough to pick up the knockout. But you've got to remember that the Incineroar has already got a special defense boost as well.
Oh, true, of course. I mean, this is an interesting situation for the Kyogre as well, because it's got that speed boost, but it's now in the sun. It really doesn't want to be in that position. When it's something like the sand on the field, then the offensive pressure of the water moves as, you know, a neutral. It doesn't get a boost or a reduction either way. But when the sun's on the field, it does reduce the pressure of those water type moves. And Zacian just going straight up for a Protect here, as is the opposing Kyogre. Doesn't want to take any unnecessary damage from something like this Groudon that has indeed gone for that Precipice Blade. So Ko, I think, you know, switching modes, coming out very early on in this game 3 into a very offensive pressure, but is now playing a little bit more defensively. And the risk that you run by doing that is you're allowing Tatsuya the opportunity to pivot the Pokemon in and out. Yes, you've lost the Gliscopod, but that Incineroar's still here, and you saw it going for the parting shot. It's going to try and reduce the stats of both of these Pokemon and get back onto the bench to come out to intimidate that Zacian a little later on.
Yeah, I like the play from Core to double protect there, because for the one reason that the grassy terrain is making sure and being aware of when it's ending, because now, like that last turn, if you'd switched in the Rillaboom there, it would have come in and then the grassy terrain would have ended, so not really preferable. So what you want to try and do is get your Kyogre off the field if you are wanting to utilize the rain. Again, in this battle, is to bring the Rillaboom in and get that grassy terrain back in effect, but doing so is kind of risky, because it could be the fact that Tatsuya takes a risk here, goes Precipice Blades, and maybe thinks, well, the Kyogre could switch out here, so if I Flare Blitz into that slot and the Rillaboom comes in, this match just got a whole lot easier.
Yeah, that's a really good observation you made about the grassy terrain. You're quite right, you would not want the Rillaboom to come in earlier, but it could come in, you know, the next couple of turns to be able to reset that terrain. Is Groudon actually playing defensively now, going for the Protect, as the Behemoth Blade was the target from the Zacian. Finally, Water Spout is allowed to come off from this Kyogre, but it's going to be only connecting onto the Incineroar, and you can see the Sun really paying off here as Incineroar's able to take that so well.
And the Flare Blitz coming out from the Incineroar here, boosted by the Sun into the Zacian, and it is enough. Picks up the knockout, and Tatsuya is able to deal with that huge threat on Core's side of the field.
Fantastic moment for Tatsuya there. We've just seen a couple of passive turns where they're both players were going for those protects and really thinking through how they're going to pivot Pokemon in, and the Incineroar just goes, you know what, Ko, I'm just going to lock you down. You've only got your Rillaboom and your Kyogre back, and now Kyogre does not have the utility to switch out and bring that rain back into the field. The Sun is here to stay. The issue, however, is still that Rillaboom. It's come in, reset the grassy terrain. It's going to be able to have that grassy glide priority, and that will threaten both of the Groudon and potentially a Kyogre if that is the fourth Pokemon hiding in the back.
Yeah, and I think here's probably a good time to maybe just protect both of your Pokemon if you're Tatsuya, if you've got the option to. We've seen the Protect on the Incineroar here, just to get around that Fake Out so you don't take any unnecessary damage from the Water Spout, and you kind of benefit from the grassy terrain as well. You know, you're going to recover a little bit of health back, and you keep both Pokemon, because I think in this scenario you want to keep the Sun on the field for as long as you can until you've dealt with that Rillaboom, and then hopefully whatever you've got in the back can come in and kind of go toe-to-toe with the opposing Kyogre.
Yeah, and the Rillaboom coming in unintimidated as well allows it to get that extra damage to pick up a KO against the Groudon. So Kyogre free to go for a single target Water Spout, and it is enough to get the KO. So Tatsuya is locked down to just one remaining Pokemon to yet be revealed. I mean, if it is something like that Kyogre coming in from the back, Rillaboom is in a phenomenal position to just get so much damage down on the board. Yeah,
and that's really unfortunate for Tatsuya, because it is the Kyogre and it's not the preferable Pokemon you want. The one thing that you could say it does have going for it is that Kyogre did take a Grassy Glide when it Dynamaxed, although it has got that double HP. It's not Dynamaxed anymore. Is it able to take an attack from the Rillaboom, take a Water Spout at the same time? It's a big ask. And utilize maybe something like the Weakness Policy boost here to take down the Rillaboom, and then have enough in the tank to take down the Kyogre. It's a big ask. It's a really hot, just bad situation to be in if you are Tatsuya, where the Rillaboom is what you want. Ko's put himself in a great position here to close this game out, and it's really, the tables have turned right now.
Well, the Kyogre going for the Protector, and I think it's going to need a lot of them to try and stall out any type of grassy terrain. Grassy Glide was, of course, the move choice, the optimal one here for that Rillaboom, followed up by the Water Spout on Ko's Kyogre there. And I think, like you've mentioned, it's so difficult for this Kyogre to find a way out. Ko was able to play perfectly, getting that Rillaboom in, and although we were like, you know, the Incineroar getting that KO on the Zacian, absolutely huge. Ko being able to bring in that Rillaboom from the back has just given him the opportunity. We don't see a Protect come out here. It's going to be the Grassy Glide, not going to be able to get a one-hit KO, and it will get that Weakness Policy activation. I feel like it's going to be a little, you know, too little, too late, particularly as the Water Spout from Ko is going to come up here and will be able to get the knockout, meaning Ko is going to take the set 2-1 and advance to the top 16.
Yeah, and you can see how impactful that Max Airstream was that turn 1, just putting that Kyogre on Ko's side of the field just ahead of everything else.